They forced me to marry the disabled CEO. 3 months later, my morning sickness suddenly began. They suspected I had cheated on my husband, and his family was ready to throw me out of the house. But then he suddenly pushed himself up from his wheelchair and declared, "I'd like to see who dares to touch my wife and my child." I was born and raised in an isolated cabin deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, where the morning mist rolls over the ridges year-round, and the scent of medicinal herbs seeps into every home as if it were part of the wood, the stone, and life itself. Ever since I was a little girl, I would follow my grandfather into the dense Appalachian woods to forage for roots, leaves, and wild flowers. My grandfather, Silas Montgomery, was known throughout the region as a highly respected traditional healer. He taught me all the secrets of our lineage, knowledge about indigenous herbs, salves, and the pressure points of the human body with endless patience and strict rigor. I always thought my life would quietly unfold among woven baskets, herbal infusions, and the damp forested trails of the mountains. But disaster struck the year I turned 25. My father, who had moved to New York City years ago and practically forgotten about me, suddenly sent a black SUV to pick me up. My mother had died when I was young. After that, he remarried, built a massive real estate development firm in Manhattan, and took his new wife's daughter, Chloe, to live with him. In all those years, he had only visited me a handful of times. But when I saw him this time, he looked haggard, aged, and his face was hollowed out by desperation. The moment I walked through his door, he gripped my hand tightly, his voice pleading. He confessed that his company was drowning in debt, owing $20 million to the bank, and bankruptcy was knocking at the door. According to him, there was only one way out. One of the largest real estate conglomerates in the city had agreed to inject the exact amount needed to pay off the loan, but with a single condition. He had to marry his daughter off to the youngest son of their family. The man's name was Caleb Vance. Caleb was the deputy CEO of the corporation, but 2 years prior, he had been in a horrific car accident. As a result, he had lost the use of his legs and was entirely dependent on a wheelchair. Malicious rumors also whispered through high society circles that the accident had left him incapable of having children. Initially, this marriage arrangement was meant for Chloe. But the moment she found out about Caleb's condition, she threw a massive tantrum and flat out refused. Wearing heavy makeup and designer clothes, standing with her arms crossed in the middle of my father's living room, she spoke to me with sheer disdain. "Lily, you're going to rot in those mountains and end up with no future. Yes, he's in a wheelchair, but his family is swimming in money. If you become their daughter-in-law, you'll live in luxury. Dad is desperate. As the eldest daughter, it's your duty to step up. I'm still young. I have my whole life ahead of me. I'm not going to bury my youth playing nurse to a." After hearing that, I turned to look at my father. He avoided my gaze, lowered his head, and let out a heavy sigh. In that instant, I asked myself if I was truly a daughter to him, or just a convenient bargaining chip to save the legacy he had devoted his life to. But thinking of the faint bond that still remained between us and the life's work he was about to lose, I closed my eyes and agreed. I signed the marriage certificate in exchange for the $20 million that would save my father's company. On the day of the wedding, I didn't wear a puffy, expensive gown, nor was there a loud, lavish reception. The groom's family simply sent a luxury town car that picked me up in silence. The luggage I brought to my new husband's house didn't consist of diamond jewelry or designer clothes. I brought a single large canvas duffel bag packed with medicinal herbs, dried roots, and the vintage acupuncture kit I had inherited from my grandfather. With that bag, I walked into a sprawling gated estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, beginning a new and completely alien life. The Vance family mansion was enormous and cold. On my first day as their daughter-in-law, I formally met the man who was now my husband. Caleb was sitting in his wheelchair by a massive bay window. His broad shoulders gave off an aura of intense loneliness and detachment, and his handsome, sharply chiseled face revealed extreme vigilance in his eyes. He swept his gaze over my simple linen clothes and said in a neutral, emotionless voice, You're here because of the $20 million, so just fulfill your basic obligations. We are strangers to each other. Don't expect any affection or pity from me. I expected nothing from this transactional marriage anyway. In silence, I arranged my things in a corner of the master bedroom and began to clean and reorganize the space. I moved heavy, exaggerated, decorative pieces to create a wider, unobstructed path for his wheelchair. Caleb watched everything without a word before turning his face back to the window. Late that afternoon, a maid brought a basin of steeped herbs into the room for a foot bath. She said it was a physical therapy treatment prescribed by a specialist to prevent muscular atrophy in the young master's legs. I waited for her to leave, then approached the steaming basin. My sense of smell, trained since childhood, immediately picked up on something wrong. The scent of mugwort, cinnamon, and safflower was there, but hidden beneath them was a bitter, piercing, and painfully familiar aroma. I reached into the murky water to examine it. Among the chopped herbs were a few slices of a grayish root. It was wolfsbane, a highly toxic plant that also grows in certain wild mountainous areas. In the exact right dosage, it can relieve pain, but used regularly as an external soak. It attacks the peripheral nervous system, causing the exposed body parts to slowly lose all sensation until the damage is irreversible. Caleb noticed me staring at the bottom of the basin. He frowned and asked, "What are you doing?" I tossed the slices back into the water and looked him dead in the eye. I told him clearly, pausing on every word, that his bath had been tampered with and someone was adding a poisonous plant to ensure his legs would never move again. Caleb froze, his sharp eyes locked onto mine, trying to decide if I was lying. Over the past 2 years, he had spent a fortune on treatments and consulted the best specialists in the country, all with zero improvement. And now, a country girl from the mountains was claiming his medicine was being poisoned. Doubt flickered in his eyes and he told me to stop spouting nonsense. I knew he wouldn't easily believe a stranger who had just walked into his life. So, I pulled a specific dried leaf from my duffel bag, dipped it into the basin and held it up to him. The leaf, originally light green, turned almost pitch black the second it touched the wolfsbane contaminated water. It was an ancient toxin detection method my grandfather had taught me. I then patiently explained the pharmacological properties of the root and the mechanism by which it was destroying the muscle fibers and nerve endings in his damaged legs. I emphasized that if he continued using this bath for another 6 months, his lower body wouldn't just be paralyzed. The tissue would effectively be dead. Caleb stared at the blackened leaf, a vein pulsing in his jaw. The calculating coldness of a ruthless businessman helped him quickly mask his anger. He then asked what I wanted in exchange for this information. I stepped closer to his wheelchair and answered firmly, "I want to make a deal. I will treat you using my family's secret methods. Give me exactly 3 months. If your legs show no signs of recovery by then, I will walk out of this house with nothing. In return for these 3 months you will guarantee my peace. No one in your family will harass me or interfere with my work." Caleb watched me in silence for a long time. Perhaps he was trying to figure out if I had an ulterior motive or if I simply wanted to survive this marriage in peace. Finally, he nodded. He called his private driver and ordered him to personally purchase every herb on a list I would provide, explicitly forbidding the maid or anyone else in the house from handling his treatments. Our arrangement began that very night. The next morning, the entire household gathered for breakfast. As soon as I walked down the grand staircase, I felt judgmental eyes land on me. Natalie, the wife of Caleb's older brother, sat at the dining table with her legs crossed. She looked me up and down in my simple cotton dress, let out a crooked smirk, and fired a sarcastic shot. "Our family sure is lucky to gain such a rustic daughter-in-law. I bet back in the woods you didn't even know what Sephora was. I can tell by the way you walk, you're used to hiking dirt trails, not stepping on custom rugs." I didn't respond. I just took my seat. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, walked out of the kitchen. She had heard every word Natalie said, and her face darkened. She set a serving dish on the table and strictly reprimanded her eldest daughter-in-law. "Lily is a daughter of this house. The moment she walked through those doors, she became family. How she dresses is her business. What matters is that she is decent and respectful. You are the eldest daughter-in-law, Natalie. Set a good example. Instead of spewing shameful nonsense, Natalie pouted and muttered something under her breath, but continued shooting me hostile glares. I looked at Eleanor and felt a quiet gratitude bloom in my chest. Since arriving at this estate, she was the only one who had treated me with an ounce of basic human decency. But looking closer at her face, I noticed deep dark circles under her eyes, a pale complexion and shallow breathing. These were clear signs of chronic insomnia and profound exhaustion caused by relentless anxiety. After breakfast, I went back to my room, gathered some mugwort, dried ginger, and angelica root, toasted them in a dry skillet, and carefully sewed them into a small linen pouch. That night, when Eleanor was in the living room rubbing her temples, I came downstairs with a warm pouch. I asked for permission to apply heat to her neck and shoulders and massage a few acupressure points. Surprised, she agreed. I placed the warm pouch at the base of her neck and began pressing specific points with my thumbs, calmly explaining the effect of each one and how they improved blood flow and circulation to the brain. In just 15 minutes, Eleanor's face softened. Her headache faded and the rigid tension melted from her shoulders. That night, for the first time in years, she slept deeply and uninterrupted until dawn without taking a single ambient. The next morning she grabbed my hands, looking at me with genuine maternal affection. From then on, under my mother-in-law's protection and backed by my silent pact with Caleb, my life in the mansion became much less hostile. During the day, I helped with household chores and cooked nutritious meals for the family. At night, when our bedroom door closed, I began Caleb's treatment. I washed the herbs myself and boiled the decoctions. The steam had a strong, earthy, bitter smell, but it was comforting. I would set the basin in front of his legs, ask him to test the temperature, and then, as his motionless feet slipped into the water, I would kneel and begin the massage. Massaging a paralyzed body is exponentially harder than treating a healthy one. I had to exert immense physical force to reach the deep muscle tissues that were beginning to atrophy. I slid my thumbs along the nerve pathways from his thighs down to his heels. Sweat would drip down my face and soak my shirt. My hands burned with exhaustion, but I never stopped for a single second. For the first few weeks, Caleb remained distant. He would sit there reading corporate documents, barely paying attention to what I was doing at his feet. Gradually, however, my dedication and persistence began to crack his armor. He started pouring me a glass of warm water and setting it on the table. Sometimes, seeing me breathing heavily, he would quietly tell me to rest for a minute. These small gestures bridged the massive gap between us. I relentlessly continued the medicinal baths and acupressure for over 2 months. Then one night, when I pressed hard on a specific reflexology point on the sole of his foot, Caleb violently flinched. He frowned and the folder of documents slipped from his hands. He said he had just felt a sharp shooting pain. My heart pounded. I looked up at him, then pressed another point on his calf. Caleb let out a low groan, his face tightening in actual pain. Tears of joy filled my eyes. Pain was the most precious signal of all. It meant his peripheral nervous system was beginning to reconnect and communicate with his brain. My grandfather's medicine was working. Caleb looked down at my hands, rough and calloused from foraging and massaging. For the first time, there was no icy detachment in his eyes, only deep, restrained emotion. Time flew by. The 3-month mark of my time as a daughter-in-law arrived. That weekend, the family held its traditional monthly dinner. Relatives scattered across Manhattan, the Hamptons, and Connecticut converged on the Greenwich estate. From early morning, Eleanor directed the kitchen staff. I rolled up my sleeves and helped cook, making a few rustic dishes I had learned back in the mountains. The atmosphere seemed warm and harmonious, but beneath the smiles, there was constant calculation and corporate maneuvering. Promptly at noon, everyone gathered around the massive mahogany dining table. Caleb sat beside me in his wheelchair, calm and silent as always. His older brother, Ryan, was stationed in London, managing the European branch, so Natalie attended alone. As soon as she sat down, Natalie started scanning the room, judging the food and shooting me her usual cutting glares. Eleanor served the aunts and uncles with a polite smile. A server then brought out a steaming platter of roasted salmon and placed it in the center of the table. I usually loved salmon, but that day, the moment it hit the table, the heavy oily scent of the fish hit me like a wall. My stomach violently churned. I covered my mouth with my hand, trying to fight the nausea, but the smell mixing with the rich sauces on the table became unbearable. I pushed my chair back abruptly, mumbled an apology, and sprinted for the powder room in the hallway. Hunched over the marble sink, I was hit by violent dry heaves. It felt like everything inside me wanted to come up, but only bitter bile followed. My temples were sweating. I turned on the cold water and splashed my face to regain control. Staring at my pale reflection in the mirror, the pieces suddenly fell into place. My period was late this month, almost 3 weeks late. For the past few days, I had been unusually exhausted, lethargic, and hypersensitive to smells. The realization froze my blood. I was pregnant. Instantly, I remembered Caleb's birthday nearly 2 months ago. He had drank quite a bit because of the endless stream of business partners stopping by to toast him. I had also been coaxed into drinking 2 glasses of expensive wine, leaving me elated. When I helped him into bed that night, the alcohol and the heavy repressed tension that had been building between us finally snapped. That night we truly became husband and wife. I had always assumed that due to his spinal injury, his reproductive functions were severely compromised. I never imagined it could happen from one single night. From the dining room, Natalie's shrill voice pierced the silence. She spoke loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Look at our dear Lily. We were having a perfectly peaceful dinner, and she runs off to throw up. That looks exactly like morning sickness to me. I think our new little country bride has some news to share." Natalie's words exploded over the table like a grenade. Eleanor's eyes widened. A mix of shock and sudden desperate joy. The whispering immediately began. Everyone at that table knew Caleb's medical condition post-accident. My pregnancy in this context was an absolute scandal. I walked out of the bathroom, wiping my mouth with a tissue, still incredibly pale. Eleanor rushed over, grabbed my hands and asked anxiously, "Lily, honey, are you okay? Are you pregnant? Tell me." I looked at her, then at Caleb. He was staring at me intensely. In his eyes there was surprise, but also a silent question. Under the suffocating weight of everyone's stares, I gave a small nod. "Yes, I've been noticing changes. Late." Eleanor lit up with pure joy. She pressed a hand to her chest and thanked God right there in the hallway. But her happiness didn't last long. Slow, sarcastic clapping echoed through the room. Natalie stood up. "My God, what an extraordinary miracle." She sneered with cruel irony. "Caleb is paralyzed from the waist down. The best doctors in the world said it severely compromised his reproductive functions. And now his brand new wife turns up pregnant. This is the joke of the year. Lily, you barely stepped foot in this house and you've already gotten knocked up by another man trying to pass off a bastard as the Vance heir." The accusation hit me like a bucket of ice water. The air in the dining room instantly froze. The relatives whose faces had shown surprise now looked at me with suspicion, disgust, and distrust. The older uncles put down their forks and began muttering. One uncle slammed his hand on the table, demanding order. But Natalie wasn't finished. She pushed her chair back, hurried upstairs to Caleb's home office, and returned a minute later holding a blue medical folder. She tossed it onto the center of the dining table. "If you don't believe me, read it yourselves. That is Caleb's medical file from 2 years ago from the clinic in Switzerland." The specialist clearly wrote, "Spinal cord injury resulting in irreversible impact on reproductive function. Caleb cannot have children. So, whose baby is Lily carrying?" Eleanor picked up the folder with trembling hands. All the color drained from her face. She knew her son's condition. The dark ink on the page seemed to steal her voice. When she looked up at me, Her eyes were filled with agonizing pain and disappointment. She didn't want to believe I had betrayed them, but the medical evidence was overwhelming. I stood frozen, gripping my hands so tightly my knuckles turned white. I knew exactly what Natalie was doing. She was using this to destroy me. She waved her arms, yelling to the room. A trashy woman who brings another man's child into this house and tries to steal our inheritance doesn't deserve to be a Vance. Eleanor, call her bankrupt father right now and tell him to come pick up his shameless daughter. But Natalie didn't just want to throw me out. With venomous skill, she pivoted her attack toward Caleb. Lifting her chin, she addressed the board members and uncles at the table. And the blame for this massive scandal falls entirely on Caleb. He's an invalid. He's not getting better, and he can't even control his own wife. A man who can't maintain order in his own household has no moral authority or competence to serve as deputy CEO. I propose we call an emergency board meeting next week. Remove Caleb from his position and hand the Florida luxury resort project over to my husband, Ryan. Several relatives slowly began to nod. Many had secretly wanted to redistribute power within the conglomerate ever since Caleb's accident. Now, armed with such a convenient scandal, they were ready to back Natalie to take him down. I looked at her and saw naked, unhinged greed in her eyes. Everything she had done today, from the public humiliation to stealing the medical file, had one singular goal: stripping my husband of his power. I took a step forward, looking her dead in the eye. I raised my chin and stated firmly, "Natalie, I am a faithful wife, and I have done absolutely nothing shameful. The child I am carrying is Caleb's blood. You are accusing me based on a 2-year-old medical report. It proves nothing about his current condition." Natalie burst into manic laughter, the sound echoing sharply off the walls. She pointed her manicured nail at me. "You still dare to argue? World-renowned doctors gave their verdict. It is indisputable. What are you going to tell everyone, that your smelly weeds and mud water magically cured infertility? How pathetic." It was exactly at that moment, when the tension was about to explode, that a large, warm, and unshakably firm hand wrapped around my wrist. Caleb gently pulled my hand behind his wheelchair, positioning himself as a shield between me and the attacking family. His grip transmitted absolute calm. Caleb showed no panic or rage. He simply swept his cold eyes over the table, finally resting on his sister-in-law's triumphant face. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it radiated the terrifying authority of an apex predator. "Natalie, are you finished?" he asked. "Good. Then it's my turn. My wife is pregnant. I am her husband, and I know better than anyone in this room who the father of this child is. None of you need to make assumptions. And you, Natalie, certainly do not have the right to question my wife's honor. That file you are holding reflects my body 2 years ago. How my body has changed since then, especially in the last 3 months, is something only I know." He paused, letting the silence choke the room. "To prove Lily's innocence, and shut all of your mouths tomorrow morning, I demand that the elders of this family accompany us to the Mount Sinai VIP Perinatal Center. We will do a full evaluation in front of all of you." His gaze locked onto Natalie, his voice dropping an octave. "But I have conditions. If the tests tomorrow prove that the child in Lily's womb is not mine, I will voluntarily resign as deputy CEO, hand full control of the Florida project to Ryan, sign divorce papers, and let Lily walk out of this house." Hearing the chance to finally seize the massive Florida project, Natalie's eyes gleamed with raw avarice. Convinced of her impending victory, she sneered. "Perfect. Keep your word. Everyone here is a witness." Caleb offered a dark, lopsided smirk. "I wasn't finished. If the ultrasounds and lab results tomorrow prove that the child is mine and that my body is fully capable of conception, you, Natalie, will be held fully responsible for today's slander and for insulting the honor of my family. As punishment, you and Ryan will immediately hand over total control of the Northeast hotel chain to me. Furthermore, you will publicly apologize to Lily in front of the entire family, and you will pack your bags and leave this estate." Natalie hesitated for a fraction of a second in the face of his utter confidence. But glancing back down at the old medical file, she regained her arrogance. In her mind, a paralyzed man could never miraculously recover his fertility. She slammed her hand on the table. "Jill. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. we meet in the hospital lobby. I can't wait to see where your precious wife tries to hide her face." Caleb didn't give her another glance. He gently squeezed my hand and spun his wheelchair toward the private elevator, quietly telling me to go rest and not to worry about the dishes. Watching his broad back in that chair, I felt a profound, strange sense of peace. In the middle of a hurricane, he had become my safest harbor. Damn. Next day, the luxury VIP lobby of the hospital was packed with Vance family members. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone had shown up to witness the historic bet. Natalie, aggressively over-made up and wearing a bright red designer dress as if attending a gala, paced the lobby with a triumphant strut. She loudly whispered to the aunts, making sure I heard, "Let's see how she faces everyone when the truth comes out. Some little hillbilly marries a billionaire, forgets her place, and shows up with another man's bastard." I sat with perfect posture on a leather sofa next to Caleb's wheelchair, ignoring her. His hand remained over mine, occasionally tapping my knuckles, transmitting warmth. After a short wait, a nurse called me back for the ultrasound. Eleanor and Natalie followed me into the dimly lit room to witness it firsthand. Caleb remained outside with the men of the family. The elegant professional OBGYN applied the cold gel to my stomach and slowly moved the transducer. The black and white image on the hide monitor was crystal clear. The doctor pointed to a tiny pulsing speck on the screen and smiled. "Congratulations. The fetus is developing perfectly. The size corresponds exactly to a 6-week gestation and the heartbeat is incredibly strong." Hearing that, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. A single tear of joy slipped down my cheek. Eleanor stepped closer, touching the screen over the image of her grandchild with a trembling finger. But Natalie couldn't have cared less about the tiny life on the monitor. She crossed her arms and sneered. "So she's actually pregnant. That doesn't answer the real question of who the father is. I still say it's not Caleb's. Don't celebrate too early, Eleanor. You're going to end up raising some stranger's kid." Eleanor whipped around furious. "Shut your mouth. We are in a hospital. Control your venomous tongue." Natalie scoffed and marched back out into the lobby, loudly announcing to the waiting relatives, "All right, she's 6 weeks pregnant now." Natalie's knees buckled and she had to grab a plastic waiting room chair to keep from collapsing. The whispers of the relatives were now completely focused on her, filled with venom. Suddenly, from the far end of the lobby, a deep, furious male voice boomed. "Answer her, Natalie. Whose baby are you carrying?" Everyone turned. It was Ryan, Caleb's older brother, and Natalie's husband. He was wearing a rumpled trench coat, dragging a carry-on suitcase. His face showed the deep exhaustion of a transatlantic flight and the absolute rage of a broken man. Seeing her husband appear out of nowhere, Natalie dropped her purse. She stood paralyzed, her mouth open in sheer horror. "Ryan, what are you doing here? You weren't supposed to be back until next month." Ryan stormed over, his eyes bloodshot. Caleb, still sitting calmly in his wheelchair, explained to the room that a week ago he had received intel about Natalie's affairs. Wanting to handle it privately within the family, he had secretly bought Ryan a first-class ticket home. But because Natalie had pushed this public scandal past the point of no return, Caleb had his assistant bring Ryan straight from JFK Airport to the hospital. Caleb gestured and his assistant handed Ryan an iPad. On the screen was a dossier of high-resolution photos taken by a private investigator. Ryan swiped through them, his hands shaking violently. The photos showed Natalie in provocative clothes wrapped around a young muscular fitness trainer outside a luxury hotel in the Hamptons. Other photos showed them making out in a parking garage. Caleb finished the story with his trademark flat tone. "It started because I hired a PI to investigate my poisoned foot baths. All the evidence pointed to Natalie bribing the maid to put wolfsbane in my water, hoping to leave me permanently disabled. While tailing her to gather proof of that felony, the investigator caught her extracurricular activities. I was going to wait for you to come home so we could deal with this quietly. But today she crossed the line by coming for Lily. Ryan grounded his teeth. The utter humiliation of being cuckolded in front of the entire Vance family seemed to snap his last threat of sanity. He spiked the iPad onto the hospital floor, shattering the screen, and turned to Natalie. He didn't slap her. Instead, he got inches from her face and unleashed a terrifying booming roar. You pathetic lying parasite. I'm freezing in London, working 80-hour weeks to build our future. And you're back home funding a boy toy with my money and trying to sneak a bastard into my family. You make me sick. Get out of my sight. Natalie collapsed to the floor, her hair falling out of its perfect blowout, her expensive makeup running with her desperate tears. She grabbed Ryan's legs, sobbing, begging for forgiveness, blaming loneliness, claiming it was just a moment of weakness. The VIP lobby erupted into chaos. Security guards and nurses rushed over, demanding quiet so as not to disturb the hospital. One of the senior uncles sighed heavily and ordered everyone back to the Greenwich estate where the family's dirty laundry would be handled behind closed doors. The convoy of luxury SUVs left Manhattan. The atmosphere inside the cars was suffocating. Upon returning to the mansion, the family convened in the grand living room. Eleanor sat on the central sofa, exhausted but sharp-eyed. Ryan stood in a corner rubbing his temples. Natalie was on her knees in the center of the Persian rug, disheveled and weeping, looking entirely pathetic. The family tribunal was swift. Faced with irrefutable proof, Ryan demanded an immediate, ruthless divorce. The board members unanimously voted to expel Natalie from the family trust, ensuring she left with nothing. Furthermore, Caleb presented a second. Natalie had cooked the books and embezzled millions from the hotel chain. Cornered, losing her marriage, her wealth, her reputation, and facing federal wire fraud charges, Natalie finally snapped. Her manic eyes darted around the room until they locked onto me, standing quietly behind Caleb's wheelchair. In her twisted mind, I was the sole cause of her downfall. Suddenly, Natalie launched herself off the floor with a speed no one anticipated. She lunged at a decorative side table, snatched a pair of heavy steel pruning shears the gardener had left by a vase, and charged straight at me, her eyes filled with murderous intent. Die. This is all your fault. If I lose everything, you don't get to live happily ever after. It happened in the blink of an eye. Eleanor screamed. Ryan and the uncles scrambled to intercept her, but they were too far away. Froze. Out of pure maternal instinct, I wrapped my arms around my stomach to shield my baby. And then, in the exact fraction of a second, when the steel blades were less than 3 feet from me, Caleb reacted. Driven by the primal instinct to protect his wife and child, he slammed both hands onto the armrests of his wheelchair. Summoning every ounce of strength his healing legs possessed, he launched himself forward. The wheelchair forcefully kicked backward, and Caleb threw his entire body over mine. He caught me, wrapped me in his broad arms, and tackled me onto the thick carpet, narrowly dodging the lethal thrust. The shears sliced through the air, clipping the hem of my sweater, and buried themselves deep into the upholstery of the sofa. Caleb held me tightly against the floor, his massive back shielding me entirely. He was breathing heavily, his muscles strained, but his arms didn't loosen. Lily, are you okay? Don't be afraid. I've got you. He whispered roughly against my ear. The entire living room plunged into absolute stunned silence. The sight of Caleb Vance, the man who had been paralyzed for 2 years, literally leaping from his wheelchair to save his wife, left everyone so shocked they forgot to breathe. No one had imagined he possessed the explosive strength to move his body like that. The spell broke. Ryan and the uncles tackled Natalie to the ground, pinning her down and ripping the shears from her hands. An uncle rushed over to help Caleb up. Caleb refused to get back into the wheelchair. He asked only to be helped onto the nearest sofa. Although sweat beat on his forehead and his legs trembled violently from the exertion, The terrifying dominant aura of the brilliant CEO had fully returned. He checked me over frantically to ensure I wasn't scratched. Then he turned to the family and pointed at Natalie, who was being held down. "Security," he ordered, his voice like absolute zero. "Call the Greenwich police. Report an armed assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Hand over the embezzlement files and the bribery evidence regarding the Wolf's Bane. There is enough here to lock her in federal prison for a decade. No settlements, no mercy." The estate security team marched in, hauled up a now catatonic Natalie, and dragged her out to wait for the cops. Ryan watched his wife being taken away, his face a portrait of total humiliation. He knew his career and standing within the family had been deeply compromised by her actions. Caleb slowly but firmly pushed himself up slightly to look at his brother. He placed a heavy hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Ryan, what happened with your wife falls partly on you as a husband and an executive. You were blind to the rot under your own roof. You let her siphon company funds and tear at the fabric of this family. You will answer for that. Next week HR will issue your transfer. You are being demoted to regional director of the Omaha branch. You need time in the Midwest to reflect on your failures and judgment." Ryan didn't dare argue. He simply lowered his head and accepted his exile. Having purged the rot, Caleb turned to the board members. With respect but absolute authority, he declared that starting tomorrow, he was officially returning to the Vance Tower headquarters in Manhattan to personally take over the conglomerate's flagship projects. Everyone nodded. No one was stupid enough to oppose a brilliant, ruthless leader who now held leverage over all of them. The family crisis was over. My position in the Vance family was cemented in stone. News of Caleb's miraculous recovery and triumphant return to power sent shock waves through Wall Street. Vance Corporation stocks skyrocketed for weeks. Inside the Greenwich estate, the oppressive, gloomy atmosphere was replaced by warmth and life. Eleanor spent her days happily micromanaging the private chef to prepare organic, nutrient-rich meals for my pregnancy. Though Caleb could now stand on his own for short periods, he still needed time to rebuild his muscle mass. Every night after brutal 1-2-hour days at the corporate office, he would come home and patiently soak his legs in the Appalachian herbal baths I prepared. As I massaged his calves, he would gently hold my hands, kissing the calluses on my fingertips, his eyes swimming with profound gratitude. One Saturday morning, a very special guest arrived at the estate. It was Dr. Arthur Pendleton, the former director of the National Institute of Integrative Medicine, a legendary, highly respected figure in American healthcare. He was an old friend of Caleb's late grandfather. Hearing rumors of Caleb's impossible recovery from a spinal cord injury, he flew in from Boston to evaluate him personally. Dr. Pendleton was a man in his 70s with a neat silver beard and a sharp, piercing gaze that saw right through people. He carefully checked Caleb's vitals, tested his deep tendon reflexes, and nodded in profound satisfaction. "Incredible. Your circulation is flawless, Caleb. The peripheral nerve regeneration is astounding. You had a guardian angel to be walking again. It defies modern medical literature." Caleb smiled modestly and pointed across the room to where I was brewing herbal tea. "Dr. Pendleton, the credit belongs entirely to my wife. She treated me with her family's botanical remedies and acupuncture for months. If it weren't for Lily, I would be rotting in that chair for the rest of my life." The old doctor turned to me, surprised. He looked me up and down with immense kindness, beckoned me over and asked gently, "Young lady, who taught you to heal? Would you mind sharing your methodology with an old man? Reversing spinal nerve damage requires a mastery of pharmacology and meridian channels that takes a lifetime to learn." I nodded politely. I set the tea tray down, went upstairs, opened my worn canvas duffel bag, and pulled out a battered leather notebook. Inside, I had meticulously documented every formula, dosage, acupuncture diagram, and reflex response I had used on Caleb since day one. I brought it downstairs and handed it to the doctor with both hands. He put on his reading glasses and turned to the first yellowed page. At first, his eyes held only polite professional curiosity, but as he read through my precise notes on the alkoid structures of the herbs and the complex botanical synergies, the color drained from his face. His hands began to shake. He pulled his glasses off, brought the book inches from his face, and looked up at me. His voice trembled with raw emotion. "Young lady, this handwriting, these specific mountain flora combinations. Are you by any chance related to the Appalachian healer Silas Montgomery from the Blue Ridge Ridges?" It had been years since anyone outside my remote hometown had spoken my grandfather's name. I nodded quickly, confirming Silas Montgomery was my grandfather. Hearing this, tears welled up in Dr. Pendleton's eyes. He stood up from the sofa, buttoned his suit jacket, and to the absolute shock of everyone in the room, bowed deeply and respectfully to me. Eleanor and Caleb immediately stood up. Confused and flustered, I tried to stop him. "Doctor, please don't do that. I'm just a younger generation. I can't accept this from someone of your stature." He grabbed my hands firmly, his voice thick with emotion. He told a story from 40 years ago. As a young medical researcher mapping rare indigenous plants in the Appalachian Mountains, he had gotten lost and was bitten by a timber rattlesnake. The venom worked fast and he was minutes from death. It was my grandfather walking the trail with a basket of herbs who found him. For a month, Silas Montgomery chewed roots, applied accuses, brewed teas, and pulled the young doctor back from the brink of death. Not only that, but Silas had generously shared traditional botanical secrets that became the foundation for Dr. Pendleton's illustrious, award-winning career. The old doctor wiped his eyes, turned to Eleanor and Caleb, and spoke with absolute solemnity. "Your family was blessed by God the day you welcomed this young woman into your home. Silas Montgomery was a once-in-a-century genius in holistic medicine. His formulas are priceless American heritage." Lily didn't just save Caleb's legs. As the sole heir to that knowledge, she is a living treasure. You must protect her and cherish her. The words of the legendary medical pioneer carried the weight of gold, cementing my place forever. A deep silence filled the room, but this time it was a silence of absolute reverence. After Dr. Pendleton left, the atmosphere in the Vance family shifted entirely. Any lingering prejudices vanished. Eleanor walked up to me, her eyes red but shining with fierce pride. She gently took my hands, the same calloused hands Natalie had mocked. "Lily, forgive me for not protecting you better from the start," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought you were just a sweet, hard-working girl. I had no idea you came from such a respected, noble lineage. You didn't just give me grandchildren. You gave my son his life back. From today on, you are my daughter. I am handing the management of this household over to you. If any relative dares look at you sideways, I will personally ruin them." The visiting uncles who had previously demanded I be tested now smiled sheepishly. One clapped Caleb on the shoulder. "You've got a brilliant eye, Caleb. Your wife is a genius and a saint. I judged her based on snobby gossip." "Sorry, Lily." I smiled politely and replied that within a family, one shouldn't hold on to grudges forever. From that day on, nobody viewed me as the poor girl sold to pay off her father's debts. Nobody whispered about my mountain origins. I was respected for my true talent and my pure heart. One evening, when we were alone in the master suite, Caleb walked up behind me. He was now strong enough to stand without a cane. He wrapped his arms around my waist, rested his chin on my shoulder, and whispered the warmest words I had ever heard. "Thank you for walking into the darkest part of my life without fear. Thank you for your patience with a broken, bitter man. Dr. Pendleton was right. You are a treasure heaven dropped into my lap. I swear on my life, I will protect and love you and our children until my last breath." I leaned back into his solid chest, listening to the strong heartbeat of the man I had entrusted my life to. The family storms were finally behind us. Caleb's triumphant return to Wall Street caused a massive stir in the real estate market. The Vance Corporation not only survived its internal crisis, but crushed the competition, winning bids to develop a string of ultra-luxury coastal resorts in California. Naturally, this news reached my biological father's family. One weekend while I was pruning roses in the greenhouse, the head butler came to inform me that my stepmother and stepsister Chloe were at the gates. I frowned, anticipating trouble, but allowed them into the parlor. Caleb, who was reading the Wall Street Journal on the sofa, looked up and his jaw instantly locked. My stepmother and Chloe walked in, sporting fake sugary smiles. My stepmother was carrying an absurdly large, expensive Harry and David gift basket. As soon as she saw me, she rushed over, grabbing my hands and gushing as if we were best friends. Chloe, wearing a tight designer dress with a high slit, her makeup flawless, strutted straight past me and leaned toward Caleb. Using a sickeningly sweet voice, she purred, "Caleb, I am so thrilled you've recovered. When I heard about your accident back then, I cried myself to sleep every night. I wanted to marry you so badly so I could take care of you. But Lily selfishly insisted on taking my place, and I had to step aside. Seeing you standing tall and handsome now, my heart is just so full." The sheer audacity of the lie made my stomach turn. Caleb gave a terrifying icy half-smile. He didn't even offer them a seat. He folded his newspaper, tossed it onto the coffee table, and spoke with a voice like shattering glass. "Chloe, do you have a severe brain injury? Or do you just think everyone in this room is stupid? 2 years ago, standing in Lily's living room, you called me all of Manhattan knows how your bankrupt family forced Lily to fall on the sword for you. So, cut the act and tell me why you brought the fruit basket. I don't have time for bad theater." Faced with his brutal bluntness, my stepmother panicked and immediately put on her victim mask. She started sobbing, crying that my father's firm was going under again. Their capital had dried up, and the bank was foreclosing. She begged Caleb, in the name of family, to delay the collection of the $20 million debt for a few more years, or better yet, forgive it entirely since we were all one big, happy family. Now, seeing Caleb remain entirely unmoved, Chloe tried to drive a wedge between us. She shot me a dirty look, leaned closer to Caleb and said loudly, "Don't let Lily's innocent country girl act fool you. Back in the mountains she had a boyfriend, her first love. They swore to run away together. She only married you for your billions. If you trust her, you're going to end up raising another man's kid." That disgusting slander was my final straw. Without saying a word, I pulled out my iPhone, opened a hidden audio file and pressed play. It was a voice memo I had secretly recorded on the day they came to my cabin. Chloe's shrill, arrogant voice echoed crystal clear through the luxurious parlor. "I'm still young. I have my whole life ahead of me. I'm not going to bury my youth playing nurse to a yes. He's in a wheelchair, but his family is swimming in money. If you become their daughter-in-law, you'll live in luxury. Dad is desperate. As the eldest daughter, it's your duty to step up." The recording instantly annihilated their charade. Chloe's face turned ash-white. Her lips trembled and she couldn't formulate a single word. Caleb stood up. His towering height and broad shoulders physically intimidated the two women. His gaze pinned them to the floor. "You heard the tape. The Vance Corporation does business with ironclad contracts, not charity for backstabbing parasites. When times got tough, you threw the legitimate daughter to the wolves. Now that I'm back on top, you come begging. Not a chance." He turned toward the hallway and yelled for his assistant. "Get legal on the phone right now. File a motion against their holding company for breach of the credit agreement. Call in the $20 million debt immediately. Not a penny less, not a day later. If they lack liquidity, instruct the courts to liquidate everything the Manhattan penthouse, the cars, the summer homes gut them." Hearing that they were going to lose their penthouse and cars, my stepmother collapsed to her knees, wailing hysterically. She crawled toward me, grabbing at my skirt, begging me to intervene, crying about family blood and asking me to save them one last time. I took a firm step back, pulling myself out of her grip. My voice was calm but absolute. "The day you forced me to the altar in place of your precious daughter, Whatever affection I had for my father died. I did my duty. I sacrificed my life for the $20 million that saved him. Whatever disaster hits you now is entirely your own doing. From this day forward, never step foot near my home again. Caleb snapped his fingers. The estate's massive security guards marched in, grabbed my stepmother and Chloe by the arms, and dragged them out of the house, ignoring their shrieking and begging. The heavy iron gates slammed shut behind them, severing my ties with those toxic people forever. Caleb pulled me by the waist, kissed my forehead and whispered, "From now on, your only family is me and our children." My 9 months of pregnancy passed in total bliss. Caleb kept his promise. He reorganized his corporate schedule, built a high-tech home office, and delegated tasks to junior executives so he could work from Greenwich and care for me. He read dozens of books on prenatal nutrition, cooked for me, and rubbed my swollen ankles every night. His devotion made me the happiest woman alive. Then the big day arrived on a crisp, clear autumn morning. My contractions started. Everything went perfectly, guided by the best doctors at a top-tier Manhattan VIP maternity ward. I gave birth to beautiful, healthy twins, a boy with Caleb's strong jawline, and a girl with delicate, bright features. The entire Vance family was overjoyed. Eleanor proudly carried her grandbabies around the VIP wing, showing them off to everyone. When the twins turned 1 and started taking their first wobbly steps, Caleb executed a secret plan he had been working on for months. He wanted to give me a real grand wedding to erase the humiliating memory of the day I arrived at his house with nothing but a canvas bag. The ceremony didn't take place in a noisy Manhattan ballroom. It was held on the deck of a spectacular luxury mega yacht anchored off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. Only true friends and loyal family members were invited. Surrounded by thousands of white roses, sparkling crystal, and the gentle ocean breeze, I walked down the aisle wearing a breathtaking custom-made Vera Wang gown escorted by Eleanor. Waiting for me at the altar, standing tall and incredibly handsome on his own 2 feet, was the love of my life. His arms open wide, Caleb took my hands and slid a flawless, radiant-cut diamond ring onto my finger. Standing under the open sky, surrounded by the ocean and the people who truly loved us, he spoke loud and clear. "Thank you for walking fearlessly into the darkest shadow of my life. With your brilliant mind you healed my broken body. With your pure heart, you brought my dead soul back to life. From this moment on, you are not just my savior and my loyal wife. You are the soul keeper of my heart and the foundation of our family. I love you, Lily." The applause mingled with the sound of the ocean waves. I looked over at our twins, giggling in the arms of their nanny, and then up at my husband's face, overflowing with love. I smiled, a tear of pure joy slipping down my cheek. The life of the mountain girl who was once sold into a forced marriage seemed like it had hit a dead end. But in reality, it was exactly there that she blossomed, opening the most beautiful, triumphant chapter of her